All right, here we are at part 2 of the video that I dropped last week, which was dealing with this cymbal that I have in my main position. It started out as a cymbal with a wild hum, and I'll link that video below so you can check it out if you haven't. But in that video, I went through and in real time showed you how I deal with correcting shape and tuning my cymbals. And I also alluded to this idea that I'm going to flesh out in this video, which is the difference between cymbals that I would call voice style cymbals and cymbals that I would call vibe style cymbals. So let's dive into that now. So in the last video I was talking about this cymbal and how I wanted it to have a chorus of tones. I talked through basically my general take on hums is that tones, hums, whatever you want to call them, notes, they're always going to be existing in cymbals, and a well-made cymbal is going to purposefully dial those tones so that there is a cohesive sound, that the tones are working together in an interesting way to provide an interesting sound to the listener. We don't want certain tones to pop out too much or sit way on top of the mix so that they kind of drown out everything else and they maybe get in the way of the other instruments that you're playing with if you're playing music with others. And generally we just don't want annoying sounds coming from our cymbals. But that being said, we also don't want to have a perfectly sterile sound, because then it's a little less inspiring. It's not, it doesn't draw out as much creativity. If we're playing a boring instrument, we might be a little bit bored playing it. So in this cymbal, I was aiming for the voice style, and that's my way of basically saying I want there to be tones and almost like chords, choruses of notes that build up in the sound that create this open sounding cymbal. That's what I mean when I say a voice style instrument. Now on the opposite side we have the vibe style instrument, vibe style cymbal, which these cymbals have a lot of those chords and those chorus and those hums kind of like they're scooped out. You don't really hear them. And another way of saying is there's so many chords, notes, tones that you can't pick out any one in particular because it's just kind of a wild sound. So you think about white noise. White noise is just tons of tones hitting you, so much so that you can't pick it out and you get this kind of staticky kind of sound. So a cymbal that's more of a vibe cymbal is going to have a little bit more of that going on. It's also going to have a little less mid-range in the cymbal. So that mid-range is going to be scooped out. You're going to get this low, growly, complex sound sitting in the fundamental zone of the cymbal. And then you're going to have the stick definition sitting out on top. Those cymbals are a joy to play because they just are never going to get in the way of anything else that's happening. You know, they're going to always be kind of sitting in their own space, very unobtrusive, but they also can have complexity and some trashiness to them so that they give you some bite and aggression when you need it. So I've basically dialed this cymbal in, and I'm going to show you before we dive into these two that I picked. I've got a vibe cymbal and a voice cymbal. And before that, I'm going to show you how I finished this cymbal. It's been resting over 48 hours now, and so before I take it to the lathe to finish it, we can take a listen to how it sounds. Kind of been wiped off from the hammering, but this is the circle where the hum was really, really nasty, and it's all clear. I have that nice chorus of tones that will actually come out a little bit more after the lathing, so it's kind of got this nice voice type character to it in its current state. 2391 grams. This is how it sounds directly after lathing. All right, so let me know what you think about this cymbal. Do you think I did a good job dialing the tones out and kind of refining it into what it is now? This is a totally finished cymbal. This is a cymbal from my Labyrinth series, so those have a little bit taller shapes and they have a little bit more of the umbrella ka, slight complexity but not trashiness to them. And you could, you heard I was able to kind of build up this chorus of tones in the sound, which really provides this big sound in the cymbal. I like that about voice style cymbals, is they can have an open big sound. Vibe cymbals, like I was saying, they're a little bit more unobtrusive, so they get out of the way. Those cymbals can almost feel a little bit more closed off at times. A dry cymbal, unlathed cymbals can be in that vein as well. They tend to be a little bit more closed, and voice cymbals tend to be a bit more open. So that's a whole nother thing I'll probably talk about in a future video, which is like open versus closed sounds. But I'm on this process. I'm bringing you along on this journey of me kind of discovering the craft of cymbal smithing and how I think about cymbals and my process of conceptualizing this very interesting craft. So this video, we're just going to stick to vibe and voice. And so I'm going to play these two cymbals next to each other. The one I have on my right is about 100 grams thinner than the main cymbal here, but it really does represent what I mean when I say a vibe. It's 22 inches, it weighs 2,284 grams, and it's about 100 grams thinner. So this one in the main position is 22 inches, and it is 2,391 grams. Almost exactly 100 grams difference, and I'll play them side by side so you can get a sense for what I mean. right, so which one of these is your favorite? Do you like vibe style cymbals? Do you like voice style cymbals? And you know, I'm coming at it from the perspective of a independent cymbalsmith that makes these by hand. So there's a totally different, it's a totally different thing when we start talking about factory pre-stamped cymbals, because those are machine automated in many ways. I have a machine hammer, but I'm still holding it by hand, and I'm guiding it by hand. And so there's just a totally different sound that I can get as an independent craftsman that leans more on the dark, complex, interesting, and nuanced side. And cymbals that come from major manufacturers can be great. They could get the job done even in jazz context, but they are going to tend to be a little bit more one-dimensional and a little bit more sterile, because they're taking that metal and they're just stamping the shape into it in one fell swoop and then doing some machine hammering. Maybe in very, very rare instances they have a couple hand hammering guys, crafts people that are sitting there and hammering a little bit. But even in the case of major brands that have hand hammering, it's always like 2%, 5% of the overall process of making the cymbal. It's not at all like what an independent does, where an independent is going to be swinging the hammer hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of times to build the shape up. And at a major company, they might, you know, sit there for 5-10 minutes and do some hand hammering before they send it off to be finalized. So it's a different thing, but there is a growing world of independent craftspeople that are literally all over the world providing these instruments that harken back to the 50s and the time period around there, where cymbals were made in this way because they didn't have the technology and the machines to make cymbals in kind of a stamped out way. So let me know what you think. Vibe, voice, which is your favorite? Drop a comment below. Hit the like and the subscribe and the bell if you want notifications, and keep an eye out for the next video. Again, my name is Timothy Roberts. We'll see you guys later. And just for kicks and giggles, over here on my left, I'm adding another one that I would definitely classify as a voice style cymbal. This is a 21-inch from my Prism series, and it weighs 2,236 grams. It is the cymbal also that, if you could see on here, kind of hard to catch, I wrote the voice on it. So this is actually the first cymbal that I wrote on, where I kind of understood the concept and latched onto the concept, and I actually labeled this cymbal the voice. So let's check it out as well. You know, to me, I think this cymbal still needs to mature. It's a little bit dry right now. I would want it to open up a little bit more, and that's something that will happen over time. But this one, you can tell, has a much more open sound that billows pretty quick, and that chorus of tones is really present in the cymbal, and it builds up and sings at you, which I really, really love that about this cymbal here. And the idea was to aim this cymbal in this direction. And it's just a little bit drier, which, I mean, is nice because you're going to have more stick definition and it's not going to open up a ton. But really, we have three, like a gradient here almost. We have the really super duper voice style, then we have kind of in the middle of the road voice, and then we have on this far right the vibe cymbal. So pretty interesting.